Hello, I'm Steph from iDriver Classic, and today we're looking at a car which is beautiful. There are less than 20,000 made, and there are even less on the road today. It is, of course, the Riley 1.5. The example we're looking at today is a Mark III. Now, in today's video, if you've never watched one of these before, we're going to have a look around the car, under the bonnet, inside the boot, so you can see how much space there is, have a look inside, through the controls, tell you the history of this very interesting vehicle and why it didn't end up replacing the Morris Minor, and then best of all, we also go out for a test drive. So buckle up, because in today's video we're discovering the Riley 1.5. Made from 1957 to 1965, the Riley 1.5 story began in the early 50s, when Nuffield, which had Riley as part of the automotive family, merged with Austin and became the British Motor Corporation. Now, when all the brains were merged on both sides, it meant that the 1.5 as we're out in today wasn't a completely fresh idea. The Morris Minor had been an enormous hit, and keen to keep building on the success and keep that market share, quite crucially, Issigonis had been working on a replacement modelled on the Morris Minor. But here's the thing, with the merger came two design teams, and in one corner you had Gerald Palmer, the man who gave us cars like the Magnette, the Javelin, the Pathfinder, and in the other corner we had Dick Burzi. Now, Burzi had an interesting career path pre-BMC, and he'd worked on the Lancias. Now, he was Leonard Lord's favourite, and he got the nod to work on the minor replacement. And here's the tea. So incensed at this perceived injustice based on favouritism, Gerald Palmer then leaves what is known as BMC. So what happens is Burzi then steps up to the plate, because he's got free rein, and he gets designing and creates the 1.5 as we're in today, but you might know it as the Wolseley 1500. But with an oil crisis, which I mentioned later on, and the growing sales of the Minor, BMC made a wise decision not to bin off the Morris Minor, which ironically outlives this car, but to add another car to the range. And as you all well know, the range then starts becoming bloated, but that's a story for another day. Now, the final product is then tweaked, and instead of being a car which comes in like for like in that low section of the range, they then decide to jazz it up a bit and create what is then known as a small sporting saloon. Now, with so many cars under the roof of BMC, the teams in charge decide to make it the Wolseley 1500 and the Riley 1.5, each tweaked slightly in styling to marry up to what people usually expect from the brand, which when we talk about badge engineering, this is a really nice early example of that and gives you an idea of how they used to do it. Both cars, however, were based on the Morris Minor, with a floor pan and monocoque construction amended by Issigonis himself. The suspension was lifted from the Minor, and if you don't know too much about that, it's a front torsion bar, wishbones and dampers, with rear leaf springs and dampers to the back. The brakes, engine and gearbox were taken from elsewhere in the BMC family, and for reference, in case you've ever driven one before, the gearbox is the MGA Type 4-type speed box. Have you tested one of those before? They're a really nice car to drive, and you should get in one if you haven't. Brakes are pretty much like a lot of stuff of the era, and they're Girling hydraulic. You've got 9-inch drums to the front and 8-inch to the rear. The engine is the 1.5B series 1489cc, which gives you 68 brake horsepower. The performance is good. Now, I looked at old brochures when I'm doing these things, and some of the motoring publications of the time put the top speed down as 82, 83, which is why I say it later on. But if you look at the official brochure, that gives you 87 miles per hour. But what's 5 miles per hour? It's above the speed limit anyway. The car did 0 to 60 on the brochure in 18.5 seconds, and the fuel economy was fair. It gave you 25 to 30 miles per imperial gallon. So overall, a pleasing result then and now. Jumping inside this Riley 1.5 is such a treat, because it feels so luxurious inside, even though of course it is linked, as I was telling you earlier, to the Morris Minor. And I don't know what to expect really, because I've seen many a Wolseley 1500 at a show, but I have never seen one of these. Now, that might be because I think with the Wolsleys they made around 100,000, whereas with these I don't think they even scraped 20,000, so it's not really a surprise that I've never seen one. You don't tend to see many Rileys way up north where I am, so coming down here and seeing this, it's been has made the whole drive completely worth it. Anyway, what is going on and what have we got in here? Well, first of all, you've got this walnutty style dash. Now, I will say one thing, is that it has been retrimmed and it has been restored, and I think the restoration on this is really nice, because sometimes you go into a restoration and you think they've taken it too far, whereas with this it feels like it's been done sympathetically and with the car's history in mind. Now these seats have been retrimmed in this lovely kind of butterscotch colour. Now the retrimming looks to have followed the same sort of lines as the original style of the seats, and they haven't expanded the seats or tried to put something newer in, which is often where, in my opinion, some of these retrim situations come unstuck, when people try and hoik in bigger seats and you lose that specialness and that sizing that was put together by the original designers. I think the original colour trim that would have gone with this burgundy red colour was kind of that dove greyish colour, but I do think that the biscuit works a treat. What do you think at home? Love to know. Now coming inside, let's walk through what we've got in this dash. Now straight over here you've got the glove box. Now the glove box is well sized, and you can see in there, we've got plenty of room. Now, I had worried that when we came inside and we saw all this extra gumph that they've used, that we were going to lose space over there. But something they've carried over and that I do really love in a 50s and 60s car is this parcel shelf, and it's been well portioned as well, and you've got that heater box just there. I certainly think that's what it is. It certainly looks like it. And anyway, you'll also notice just there that they have put in a replacement choke. Coming into the centre here, you've got your temperature controls, that's for your heater, and then you've got your speaker and you've got your stereo. Now I did ask if the original dash had been cut into, or that was something that was an optional extra, and if you didn't go for the stereo, you got the blanking plate. And bear in mind, these weren't the cheapest car at the time. I believe when they were new, they were, I think it was £819 at launch. So certainly not a cheap little thing, but I don't know what your thoughts are. I do think even by the Mark III, they've not compromised, and it still feels really quality and it looks quality. Don't know if you saw that trim on the outside of the doors, but little things like the shaping of the boot lid, the chrome on the doors following through onto the bodywork, stuff like that makes it feel just so timeless in its design. It is really such a beautiful thing. It's so much more than a car. But anyway, coming in front of us, 3 gauges. Again, this is a big step up, because remember, we're coming through from the austerity, the 40s, the early 50s, where cars are still something that you have to wait years for. You have to go on a waiting list. And we're now into the buzz of that early era where you choose to have a car, you can go down and you can get it. So cars just come on so quickly at this point. So your 3 gauges, before I run away with the story for you, you've got your speedo, and I believe the top speed on these is about 80, what is it? Is it 82, 83 miles per hour, which of course we're not doing today. Over into the centre here, you've got your oil, your temperature and your fuel gauge. And then you've got a rev counter. I wasn't expecting that, but I should have, because Riley, of course, really played up to being the car of someone who loved a sporting vehicle. They played to that audience that loved driving for driving's sake. Because remember, fuel starts to come off ration by this point, although in fact, let me talk about the oil crisis in just a second. Coming down from there, you've got your fog lights. These were an optional extra. They aren't fitted on this. Over into your panel light switch, your lights, which are on a pull, as you probably expect, and you've got your wipers there as well. Over on the left-hand side, next to the redundant choke, is your push start. I'm sure you expected that because of the age of the vehicle. Now, we were talking about oil and petrol. One of the reasons that this did not take over from the Morris Minor, and in many ways I don't think it should have, because I think it plays to such a different audience. Even that Wolseley 1500, it feels like a massive step up from that bog standard world of Morris Minor motoring, is because of the Suez oil crisis. So they looked at it and they said, if we discontinue the Morris Minor, we're into a bit of a meltdown here, because by discontinuing the Morris Minor, we're taking away one of our best cars with good MPG. Now, this was a savvy move, because BMC's best year for the Morris Minor was either 1958 or 1959. So that decision in 1957 to still roll with it was definitely a good one. Although remember, the model was 9 years old by that point. So it was around about the time BMC used to run stuff for a maximum of about 9-10 years, and then they'd be like, right, okay, let's draft in the replacement. So it was the right time. But of course, as we know, the Morris Minor continued till like, what, 71? I think it's 72 abroad. Crazy. But anyway, so those are all our controls. You can see it's all beautifully laid out. Just going to draw your attention as well to the door handles. They are original, and they are such a nice detail. Again, so much thought is in this car around how it looks as well as how it functions. And that for me is what I love about this era of motoring, because by the time you get into the 70s, and we were recently talking about this on that Hillman estate, you lose some of that, don't you? You lose the fancy, and it's all about cost cutting. What's the competitor doing? How can we keep costs as low as possible? Beauty gets thrown out the window, and functionality and cost cutting and saving money are the bywords. And it's to the detriment, really, of the world of motoring. But anyway, I could go on for a million years about that. Have a listen to this 1500 engine. I was talking to you about it as we walked round. It's a nice thing. Can't remember if I keep saying it's a push start. I hope it is, because I've said it is. Yeah, there we go. Just pull this out for you. A little bit of choke. I feel like the B series, it never runs as smooth as the A series. Maybe that's just me. Have a listen from the back, and then we'll take her out on a run. Right, let's go on an adventure. Well, the adventure starts once we go past these blooming speed bumps. One more to go, and then I'm going to try and get up to Falls to show you. And there we are, we're up into fourth. Now remember, on these, you've got a 4-speed box with reverse. First gear has no synchron, which is probably exactly as you would expect. Now as you cruise along, you really do feel that B series fling into life. It doesn't feel like too much power, but it certainly feels like that oomph that you need just to get that car going and really keep up with modern traffic. She was straight off the lights without any hesitation, and it's just really nice to be cruising along in. Now in terms of cruising along in this is just delightful in the way it's laid out. Although I will issue some caution, because if you read the original reviews, they do talk about how if you are tall, you're probably going to struggle. And I didn't really appreciate that until I got in. So I'm only 5'3", and this is perfectly sized for me. And remember, a lot of men of the era were maybe 5'7", 5'8". I think that was around the average height. And so therefore, I think maybe a few more inches, you wouldn't feel it. 6 foot, and I think that your eye line would start hitting up here, because this rubber extends down quite far to, you know, an inch or so below the sun visor, and I do think that might slightly impede your view. So if you are a tall person looking at one of these and thinking, I'd like one, don't buy it blind. Make sure you get a sit in, because you might get a nasty surprise when it arrives. Now, talking about the driving experience, gosh, it is so lovely. Now that box at first was a little bit to get used to, because in my head I thought there was going to be a lot more travel between the gears. I thought it was going to be a lot more pudding stirry, where in fact actually it's very notchy and you can just go straight through the box. Every gear has its place and there really is no margin of error with it. It's straight in, straight out, which I quite like actually now that I've got used to it, but it certainly wasn't what I was expecting. The brakes on these are as standard, so they're drums all the way round, which is exactly what I would expect for a car that came to market in 1957, even though we have got that 1.5 engine. Because remember, BMC continued to put drum brakes onto stuff into the 1970s. So to have this on a car in, what is this, 64? I'm not really moved by it, to be honest. It's exactly what I thought it would be. And as we come around the corners, I was reading reviews from the time, and it said that it has a bit of a lean, but honestly, it's no worse than anything else. It's about where you would expect it to be. And it feels like a very grown-up step up from the Morris Minor. And it's one that I would dearly love to hook myself, but of course my budget only ever extends to about £1,500, so I'll never be getting one of these. But if you are a Morris Minor driver, or you love the Morris Minor, and you think I could do with a little step up, but I'm not sure what to go for, something like this might be just what you're looking for. The steering is so light and so responsive, and as you come round, look, you're barely moving the wheel, you're not having to correct it. The seats are comfortable, they're upholstered in the same way as the originals, so I would imagine that you get that same sort of feel. There's plenty of room around you, because you might have been in a Morris and thought, well, you know, once you start adding all these extra bits in, does it start to feel a wee bit claustrophobic inside? Well, not at all, actually. It feels remarkably spot on in a way that I wasn't quite expecting. I thought it was going to feel maybe a little clustered inside, and it really doesn't. And because of the size of it as well, it's really good for a bit of urban driving, because the bigger the vehicle, especially on a classic, the more cumbersome it can feel once you start to try and navigate some of these busy town roads. And this is nipping in and out easily enough, and it's very nice indeed. And it is quite quiet in the cabin as well, so there's nothing that's really been done to it to lessen that noise. And it doesn't interrupt your conversation. You're not having to shout to be heard. It just feels like a refined driving experience, which is exactly what Riley promised. And I didn't know what to expect decades afterwards, but you know what? Still pretty true to it. And I know it's been restored, but as I say, it hasn't been overly restored, so we still get that original driving experience, and we still get that original feel for it, and it's just absolutely lovely. But what would I change? Because of course there are always things that you could change. Well, I feel that with that 1.5 giving us into the 80s, it opens up motorway driving potential. Now, I know that fifth gear was way off on the production side of things, but really a fifth gear would be nice on this, because you could take it onto a motorway, and I know that if I took this onto the motorway now and did 70, the engine wouldn't be straining, but that gearbox would be whining, and I don't think that would be a nice experience. And also, I don't know if you clock that boot lid. Now, that boot lid doesn't open all the way, and if you look at the original brochures, it looks like it does, but in actuality, it doesn't open that far, which means that although you've got the space, the capacity to use it is somewhat impeded. So for me, those are the two areas where it loses marks and that I would like it to be tackled. Of course, I'm sure there are many that would love to take something like this on a motorway and would say, well, I would like disc brakes as well. Completely appreciate that, and to some extent would agree. Now I'm going to take this back now. I'm going to open her up maybe a little bit on this this A road, have a bit of fun, but goodness me, Riley 1.5, beautifully designed. The time spent in the design studio wasn't lacking when it came to the mechanical side of things as well. It really marries up perfectly to give you a car which isn't just pleasing on the eye, but is pleasing to drive. So yeah, if we could sort that boot lid, that would be great, but if not, I'm not too picky. I would be happy to add a 1.5 to my stable. Now, if you're watching this and you're looking to buy one, really fantastic support from all the clubs. The Riley Club is incredibly supportive, lovely group of people, and can give you everything you need. If you're looking for parts are shared with quite a few bits and pieces. And if you are tall, remember, double check that this isn't going to stop you enjoying the car. That's it from me today. I'm up in fourth gear, so I think you can probably see my point. But until next time, take care and drive safely.